Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. This is your weekly update. I'm going to just talk my way through some of the content that you're going to see in the third module, and I want to make sure that you have a good, solid understanding of that. I want to call your attention back to last week. Last week I talked about how to incorporate quotes directly into your work. That's going to be, again, the focus of 3.1e, which you will be handing in tomorrow as of the posting of this video, and 3.1, which we'll go into next week, and then we'll be getting into the critique the week thereafter. My intent is to talk about rhetorical modes, the rhetorical modes inside this module right now. And then as we go into the very next week, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to start to segue into the MLA process of how you go about citing sources and how you build a works cited page. You are expected to have a works cited page for the third paper inside the third module, but that does not count toward the total number of pages. So you'll have to have 3 pages of content, 3 full pages of content, and you'll also have to have a works cited page on top of that. Again, this entire semester we've been building purpose and audience. We're starting to blend some modes together. Now we're starting to add some more modes and use them to analyze other people's work. And we're going to move into the 4th and 5th modules, which are going to deal with research, give you some basics for research, and that's going to carry you straight into English 112, where we're really going to ramp up the research. So we're getting close to the halfway point this semester. It's a short semester, but still about the halfway point. Okay, 3.0. As you come into 3.0, you're going to see that basically you have 3 main rhetorical modes here. You can have definition, classification, and cause and effect. Now, in the prior module, we studied compare and contrast, narration, description, and process narration. And all of those can be combined in various ways, as you could see in the last paper that you did. These have been specifically chosen for this particular module because they fit well with the critique. I'm going to talk, like I said, my way through some of it. I'm not going to give you the full shebang, the full lecture. There are some videos in there that can give you things like that, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of each one so that you understand how it fits into your writing toolbox. All right, definition might seem like the most straightforward. It is absolutely not the most straightforward, not even a little bit. If you've ever been in a relationship before, you intuitively understand this, because the minute that somebody says, I'll be home later, that's a problem, because they don't have, probably, I would be willing to wager, the same definition of later. One person, let's just say the man in this case, might have the definition of later as 2 a.m. And when he's speaking to, let's just, it's going off the picture here, the woman that he's speaking to might have a definition of later as being something like 9 p.m. If they're talking at, say 5 p.m. in the afternoon. They're both technically correct, because later is any time after the present, but he is incorrect because he knows somewhere in his head that she doesn't understand the same definition that he does. So definition is not straightforward. It is a matter of pinning down terms in such a way that both parties understand it in the exact same way. Again, in a relationship circumstance, if it's 5 p.m. and he says, I'll be home later, if he or she, either one of them, stop at that moment and say, wait a minute, before you leave, we're defining later, so that way we both understand it. If later is defined as maybe 10 p.m. and then he comes home at 10 p.m., nobody's upset, right? But if he comes home at 2 a.m., he knows he's in trouble because he agreed that the definition of later was 10 p.m. and he is not home at 10 p.m. So again, that's what definition is. How do we apply that into an academic context? Well, you're going to be defining all kinds of complicated terms. Evolution actually has several different definitions. Some of them are more valid than others. But by pinning down what you mean, you're going to have a specific conversation. And by the way, I have had students before say, well, I don't agree with that, or I don't believe in it, or something like that. Okay, good. But you still, if you're going to argue against it, you still have to define what it means to be able to argue against it. Are you arguing against Lamarckian evolution, Darwinian evolution, classic Darwinian evolution, epigenetic evolution? Which one do you mean? Because they don't all mean the same thing, and you can't just mix and match them and say, well, okay, I like a little of this one and a little of this one because it makes it easier for me to argue. It doesn't work that way. You have to define it clearly so that you can critique it clearly. All right, so again, you can use the dictionary. Right? You can. I mean, go look up a word in the dictionary, except the problem is the dictionary is only halfway defined terms. I always give this example, and you can pause the video here. All of these words, every one of these, sorry, there's some guy driving up the road right now. All of these words mean the same thing as friend in some degree, in various degrees here, right? But I always use Randy Jackson, classic Randy Jackson from American Idol, where he says, yo dog, what's up? When somebody walks in, right, he can say that, but he can't say, yo acquaintance, what up? Yo classmate, what up? Yo bro, what up? Right? Because this does not have the same feeling. But again, if you look up any of these words in the dictionary, you're going to get a one-to-one correspondence. They're going to use some combination of these words to define the other words. What I'm getting at here is that there are different denotations and connotations for words. Denotation is the literal meaning, and the connotation is the other stuff, the baggage that comes with any given word. So if we go back one slide, the denotation is the same for everything on the screen, but the connotation is different. If I say, what up amigo, that implies to some degree that I am able or capable or savvy to using Spanish. If I say, what up comrade, that might imply that I'm Russian in some degree, some shape or form, right? So each of these has a slightly different meaning that is applied to that word. The connotation is a living part of the language as well, and this is one of the reasons you have to be able to pin down words and what they mean. All right, the rest of the slides that I have actually just go into some of the methodology that's covered inside the module, so I'm going to stay away from that. Again, I just want to give you an overview of each one of these. So let's jump now directly into classification. Classification is a fairly straightforward one. It just is a matter of dividing things into types and the categories. Division is oftentimes used with it, but they're essentially the same activity. If I have a bunch of different things and I want to classify all of them, I can sort them into those categories. But if I have one thing, I might subdivide it, but really the activity is the exact same. So it's sorting things into types. This is grouping things or breaking down a total. Why do we go about doing this? Well, there are different purposes. One, because we need to make sense of the world. This is absolutely how we make sense of the world. And in fact, some psychologists will tell you that one of the very first classifications we ever make is between our internal self and the external world. Some psychologists hypothesize, for example, that children scream because they can't differentiate between that. They don't know that it's their body that is feeling hunger. They just, there's some weird sensation. I don't know what that is. I don't know what's going on. Right now I'm hot, now I'm cold, now I'm hungry. But they can't make sense of that because they haven't demarcated between the external world and their internal selves. So we make sense of the world. I always give the thought experiment here to students when I do this in a classroom. Can we convey what that image looks like to somebody who can't see it? Yes, absolutely. And we do it by classification. There are purple squares, orange circles, green triangles. They all have various shapes and they're on a blue background. By classifying it, I have made something that is very haphazard into something simpler, that's streamlined, that I can easily convey to other people. All right, by purpose number 2, by sharing a specific way of classifying things, we can find certain interpretations. So we can see the relationship between dogs, by the way, in which we classify and divide those animals. We might have Canis domesticus, Canis lupus. We see that those are related because of the Canis, but the lupus would be a wolf and the domesticus would be a house dog, right? But we can see that they are interrelated. This is actually one of the ways that we have veterinarian services, because we can see those interrelationships. We also use it to formulate an argument. 2 great examples in science: planets. If we classify planets, we can see that Pluto has been kicked out of the Planet Club because it did not pass muster. It did not meet the essential qualities required to be a planet, right? And that mixes, by the way, with a little bit of definition and a little bit of description. We need those to be able to make that argument. Same thing if we talk about evolution. This is actually one of the bases of the argument for evolution. How many vertebrae does a giraffe have? It's right there in the picture, 7. How many vertebrae do you have in your neck? Same number as a giraffe, 7. How many vertebrae does a bat have? Same number. Horse, same number. Chimpanzee, same number. All mammals have the exact same number, right? Except 2, with the exception of those 2 right there. They have, I believe, more, but there's not really a reason why. Those are the only 2 mammals in the entire mammal kingdom that do not have just 7 vertebrae in their neck. So that's one of the underlying reasons. The argument is, well, how did that happen? And then you delve into genetics and you delve into physical structures, and that's one of the arguments that's made. All right, methodology. Actually, I'm going to stay away from that. That gives you an overview of it because that information is covered inside the module as well. And then I want to jump directly into cause and effect here and give you a little bit of an overview of that as well. And I want to wrap that up by talking through why I'm doing all this. All right, cause and effect. It's kind of like classification, like what I just talked about a second ago. You are intending to reveal some kind of ordering in reality itself, right? You're going to try to find a particular reason that something happened or a particular consequence of that thing happening. Here's a quick slide. You can pause it on this and you can read the examples I have if you wish. There is a distinction between these two words. These words are what are called homophones. Homophones are words that sound the same but have different meanings or different spellings. That might be different from other types of homonyms out there. So effect is a result or a consequence. Affect is influence, shape, touch, or move. Generally, the top one is a noun, and generally the bottom one is a verb. There are exceptions, of course, but the effect as a verb is an older form. Affect is generally used as a noun only in the social sciences. When do we use them? Well, we use them all the time. This is actually one of the modes that you're most likely to use in college because your instructors in, say, like history, for example, are going to want to know why something happened or the effect of that particular thing. Those are two different things, two completely different things. And I can't emphasize that enough. Let me jump to the next slide. And cause and effect it means one thing. Cause or effect means something else. Okay, so make sure you differentiate. These are actually two different rhetorical modes, but they behave very similarly, which is why they're linked, very commonly linked. So make sure that you understand that you're either talking about the causes or the effects, unless somebody specifically says, talk about the causes and effects of these particular things. Now, again, I'm going to stray away from this because it gives you a little bit of an overview. I'm going to bring it back around and summarize what I'm doing. Why do we need to study this stuff? It's because it's really important. Again, definition, we're going to establish the same basis. Classification, we are going to understand how the world is organized, generally speaking, in a scientific way. Like, how did scientists go about organizing the world? Do you understand that system and can you apply that system? If there is no system, how can you invent a system in order to effectively classify and divide things so you could talk about them, like that picture I showed you? Cause and effect. What are the reasons that led up to this particular event? What are the consequences of that event? As you go through your critique, the reason that these are important is because they are great ways that you can think about the article that you've read. What did the author define or not define? What does the author need to define? What did the author classify or divide, either explicitly, as in they tell you, or implicitly, as in they're not telling you, but they are very clearly making categories. One example would be the video game article that's listed in the critique right now that implicitly divides video games into different categories, right? Here are the calming ones, here are the sort of fight or flight ones. I believe that there's only something like one sentence in there, so you might critique that. Should that author have spent more time talking about those classifications or those definitions of what those particular game types mean? Cause and effect. What are the reasons that the particular thing happened? So if you're talking about the coronavirus, for example, what are the reasons that the school systems broke down in the ways in which they did? What are the effects of that? Does the author appropriately talk about those causes or those effects? As you're reviewing this, keep in mind you have to be fair. You can't say, oh, I would like to have seen the author, define and talk about the video game Doom in this article, because I like the video game Doom. That's not fair because that's not in the focus of that article. So that's not a good critique. Instead, what you might say is it would have been nice to see a little bit of that acknowledged, right? Other types of games that people use for meditation, like, for example, somebody plays Doom and they feel a certain sense of, I know it sounds strange, but peace. You can ask gamers who really get into that game. I'm not one of them. And they will say that maybe they feel a sense of peace playing it because they can unwind playing it. Could that author have acknowledged that? Does that fit with the author's point? Because actually, by the way, that could fit with the author's point. And you could say, as a valid critique, some gamers report that from other types of games, and this would have reinforced the point. It would have been nice to see that in the article as well. That's a valid critique because it fits with what the project of that author is, and it expands it slightly and just points to a place where she could possibly improve. That's not saying she's wrong, she should have done it, and she failed to do it, so the article's complete trash or anything like that. It just means that you're suggesting a way that author could have improved. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.